I wanted to do is just chat for a little while, 3 or 4 hours. And then I'll stop and take any questions or comments you might have, and any thoughts you want to share. Because the truth is that in Washington it is very easy to get caught up in a bubble. In other words, you live in a world where $1 billion here and $1 billion there, and it's a certain culture. You kind of forget about the real world and what real people are going through. So I'd love to hear any thoughts you have and any questions you might have. This is probably the most difficult moment in our lifetimes. And you know, our parents and grandparents who went through the Great Depression, they went through the war, they had their share of problems. But to underestimate what we and our kids and grandchildren are going through right now would be a mistake. We have gone through COVID, and I don't have to tell you the price that this country and the world have paid. It's not only that we lost 1 million people, it is the anxiety that it has caused, the isolation that it caused. I'll never forget a year or two, I was up in Lindenville at the Institute there, talking to kids who were outside. We didn't even go inside. And this girl, beautiful young lady, and she said, what's breaking her heart is she loves her grandmother very much. Grandmother is in a nursing home, she can't go in and visit her, because they didn't allow outsiders to go into a nursing home. And the kids were not able to go to school, you know, small business people went under, lost their businesses, etc., etc. So we've gone through a very traumatic period in terms of the pandemic. We went through a lot of economic anxiety during the pandemic. We were for a while in probably the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. Everybody knew no one was going out. Businesses went under, schools were pressed, hospitals were overflowing with COVID patients, they were pressed. So it was a very, very difficult time. And what I'm proud of, doesn't get a whole lot of discussion, is that during that period, Congress for a Change did the right thing. And we passed what was called the American Rescue Plan. And that meant that everybody in this room, I suspect, got a check for $1,400, which at that moment meant a whole lot. If you're a family of 4, that helped. We extended unemployment benefits to people who had lost their jobs. We helped small businesses. We kept schools afloat. We got money to hospitals that were being overwhelmed with COVID patients, etc. And I think the result of that is that we came out of that period economically probably a lot faster than anyone would have thought that we would. But we have numerous crises piling right on top of each other. Again, I don't have to tell anybody here what's going on with climate change. We experienced it in this state last month. The flood that we had here was the worst natural disaster that Vermont has experienced since 1927. And I have visited a number of the locations, Barry, Montpelier, other parts of the state, Londonderry, and it's really a sad sight to see. About 4,000 homes have been damaged. Some of them are not going to be rebuilt. 800 businesses were impacted. And right now what we're trying to do, the delegation, Senator Welch and Congresswoman Ballant and I are working hard to try to make sure that we get the federal funding that we need to rebuild effectively. But a lot of difficult decisions have got to be made in Vermont and around the country. Do you rebuild in the same place that you had a flood? What do you do? Difficult questions that the legislature, governor, and all of us are going to have to deal with. So we got the pandemic out there, we got climate change out there. We have, in my view, a major healthcare crisis in America. My own view is that the current healthcare system is broken, largely dysfunctional. We are spending twice as much per capita as the people on the other side of the lake, and yet we have 87 million Americans who are uninsured or underinsured. We have a lack of doctors, nurses, dentists, mental health providers, pharmacists. So they're all issues. I'm chairman of the committee that deals with this stuff, and we're working on it. But that is the reality of what I've inherited. And then on top of the healthcare crisis, you have a crisis in the cost of prescription drugs. Anybody buy some prescription drugs lately? cost of drugs in this country is by far the highest in the world, and we have to take on the greed of the pharmaceutical industry. We're working on that. And on it goes. Economically, what we are seeing is a nation now which has more income and wealth inequality than has ever existed in the history of this country. You all know that?
Oh, yeah.
In other words, while 60% of the people in America, including many here, are living paycheck to paycheck, just really struggling to put food on the table and take care of their basic needs, you got 3 people who own more wealth than the bottom half of America. And in sector after sector, whether it's Wall Street, whether it's healthcare, whether it's agriculture, food, you see fewer and fewer very, very large corporations controlling the economics of those sectors. So you got tremendous concentration of ownership, concentration of income and wealth, and those are issues we have to deal with. And that spills over then to our political system, which is basically corrupt in the sense that billionaires are able to spend unlimited amounts of money through super PACs to buy and sell politicians. So for all of you who are billionaires, you can, and I'm sure there are many in the room, you can establish your own super PAC and put a few $100 million in there, and you can elect who you want, and defeat who you want, etc., etc. So those are some of the issues that we're dealing with. Now, in the midst of all that, let me give you a little bit of good news, is that in terms of prescription drugs, we're making a little bit of progress. And the progress that we're making is that in terms of insulin, diabetes is an epidemic in America. And in terms of insulin, if you're on Medicare, you will no longer have to pay anything more than $35 a month for your insulin products. Within a year or two, I don't remember exactly, no senior on Medicare will have to pay more than $2,000 out of pocket. So there are a lot of seniors who have chronic illnesses spending $5,000, $8,000 out of their own pocket. $2,000 will be the max, and that's a step forward. Furthermore, for the first time, we have had modest success, I don't want to overstate it, in taking on a very, very powerful pharmaceutical industry. In my view, some here may disagree with me, you have an industry which is incredibly greedy, and they are charging us in some cases 10 times more for the same product sold in Canada or in Europe or Japan or any place else. They make huge amounts of money. And what they do with their lobbyists is to just make sure that they continue to be able to charge any price they want. But what we did do is got a provision passed that for the first time, Medicare will be able to negotiate prescription drug prices with the pharmaceutical industry. That means they will not be able to charge any price they want. This is not a radical idea, it's not all over the world. It's why Canadian prices are half of what ours are, and why the VA has prices that are much, much lower than the general public. They've negotiated for 30 years. They do a very good job at that. So for the first time, they're going to negotiate 10 drugs, and that will expand over the years. Pharmaceutical industry, of course, is going nuts. They are going to court trying to overturn this, and having their friends in corporate world trying to overturn it. But I think we will prevail. So we're working on prescription drugs. We're working on trying to lower the cost of healthcare. We're working on making sure that Social Security will be there for you and your kids. Now the bad news is, and I don't mean to be terribly partisan, but Republicans gained control over the House last year. One of the first things some, not all, of them were talking about was cutting Social Security. They never used the expression cutting Social Security. They talk about Social Security reform. When you hear people talk about Social Security reform, get very, very nervous. Because their reform is not... Get to you later, okay? What their idea of reform is raising the retirement age or cutting benefits. Last year, many of you who were on Social Security received, I think it was an 8% COLA, right? That's pretty good. And some of them would want to change the structure of how we determine COLAs and get less than real inflation. Now, to answer the gentleman's question, do we have to do something? We do. And I'll tell you what we have to do in order to make sure that Social Security is solvent for not only our generation, but for the future. Does anybody here know what the major financial weakness, the way Social Security raises money, what is the weakness of the program? Anyone know?
The limits.
Exactly. All right, there's a cap. So what that means, if this gentleman makes $10 million a year, I'm sure you do, and our reporter here from the Newport Express only makes $160,000, I'm sure he doesn't, they will both pay the same amount into Social Security because there's a cap, which is a dumb way to do things. So we're trying to eliminate that cap. You eliminate that cap, and he pays on his whole $10 million, we will make Social Security solvent for 75 years and be able to raise benefits. So that's kind of what we're focusing on trying to do. Okay, there are a lot of other issues out there, but I wanted to touch on some of them. And again, the bottom line is, these are difficult times. That's all. And I wish I could tell you that they weren't, but they are. They're difficult times, and people are feeling anxious. There is a reason why we have a mental health, literally why we have a mental health crisis in America right now. We're trying to deal with that. We don't have enough mental health providers in this country. We're trying to deal with that. But people are feeling a lot of anxiety, a lot of foreboding about the future, what it's going to bring for our kids and future generations. So if you hold those feelings, you're not alone. I mean, it is what many people are feeling, and we've got to figure out how we address those issues, and we create an economy that works for everybody, how we deal with climate change, not easy, how we fix a broken healthcare system, make sure that our kids get quality education, do all the things that I think the American people want us to do. Okay, any questions or comments? I think, who's got it? Beth, you're going to be running around?
Yeah, I've got a wired mic though, so it may be a little longer.
All right.
You here?
Yeah, I've got a woman right here. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Heidi Eichenberger, and
Put it right up to your mouth.
oh, okay. And I have a question. We've been trying for the past 5 years to get some senior housing in Newport, and in the whole Northeast Kingdom, there's a serious lack, and they're closing down nursing homes and everything. And
Yep.
what we want to do is do non-profit because
Good.
it's the only thing people can afford. So my question is there any way that you can help us with this?
Absolutely. We are, some of you may recall a program called Build Back Better. That ring a bell?
Yes.
And not many people know what the hell was in that program. But that would have been the most significant piece of legislation passed in this country since the Great Depression. All right? It would have dealt basically with all of the crises that we are talking about in a very significant way. Got passed in the House, we lost in the Senate by 2 votes. As part of that bill, and what we have got to do was an investment of hundreds of billions of dollars into low-income, affordable, and senior housing. The crisis that you're talking about, believe me, it's not just up here in the North Country, it's not just in Newport. Go to Bennington. I was down in Bennington, in fact, just the other day. It's difficult for them to attract nurses because they can't even find affordable housing. Police departments having a hard time attracting police officers, etc., etc. This is a huge crisis. In Burlington, the homeless issue is very severe. It is a huge issue all over this state and all over this country. So to answer your question, we need to invest very significantly in building affordable housing, including senior housing. So thank you. We will work with you. We have brought in some money for housing programs, but it's nowhere near enough. Okay, other questions? Yeah, I see a hand back there.
Senator Sanders, you didn't mention one issue that's very dear to my heart. It's that Congress is making laws about what doctors can give for care to women. I won't use the A word because that's not the issue. The issue is whether a young woman can go to a doctor and get the care she needs without Congress saying what they can and cannot do.
All right, I agree with you, but it's not primarily Congress right now. It is state legislatures and state governors, not in this state, but all over this country. It was stunning to me, it really was. I don't have a lot of faith in our current Supreme Court. But the idea that the Supreme Court in the year 2023 would do away with what we have had in this country for decades, that is the constitutional right of women to be able to...
It was settled law.
It certainly was, and you know, the right of women to be able to control their own bodies and do away with that really was disgraceful and unsettling. You know, and this becomes a very, very partisan issue. I can tell you that on this one, the Democratic caucus is virtually united in doing whatever we can to protect the woman's right to choose. We're trying to bring forth legislation, not easy. And we have a lot of very strong opposition. But here's some good news. And the good news is, I think what some of my Republican colleagues are finding, you are aware that in Ohio, a few weeks ago, there was a referendum, and ostensibly it was about changing the rules, whether they would have to go from 50% to 60% to pass a referendum. Everybody knew it was about, because there is a referendum going to be on the ballot there, whether or not women will be able to continue to control their own bodies in Ohio. And to the dismay of many of my Republican colleagues, 60% of the people basically said, you're going to keep that number at 50%, and come November, we're going to pass legislation to protect a woman's right to control her own body. So I think nationally what you have, I'm guessing 60, 65%, maybe more, of the American people think that women should have that right. You have a very active minority who disagree. Okay, and I would also say that in Vermont, thank God, I would say that number is probably 70, 75%, and a woman's right in this state will remain sacrosanct. Okay, other questions? Gentleman back there.
Yeah, I just have a question. Are you working on the USDA? The big thing with the USDA now, all the programs are being revamped and updated. Every 5 years they do it, and that's coming up. And I think September is what, the deadline for it? Yeah, the Farm Bill.
Yeah.
Okay, my concern with that is with a lot of the seniors here in Vermont get SNAP benefits and whatnot. Big thing.
Yes.
You know, if seniors eat well, they don't end up having to have to go to the doctor a lot. I have friends that are doctors my age, and they're concerned also. They live in other states, but they said, you know, if people don't eat well, they're going to end up coming in and seeing us all the time, which they are more. The other thing is the equation of how they figure out SNAP benefits, I think, is outdated, completely outdated. The problem with the Social Security increase, that was great. All the seniors I keep hearing, oh, it was great, but the problem is it creates negative math. You get more, but then they take it away. They take the benefits. And the average senior here in Vermont, from my equation, from talking to seniors, they lost between $50 to $75 per month
I don't think
in benefits. Yeah, it's not high if you actually action.
I don't
But if
think
you
so.
get more, then they...
I know, I understand, that does kick in, but I don't think it ends up in that result. I think most seniors end up better off. But your point is well taken. I mean, this is a program that, what you're talking about goes beyond seniors. For example, if right now you're a low-income working class person, right? And you're getting SNAP, or maybe you're getting some child care benefits. Well, if you work hard, you get a better job, and your income goes up, guess what happens? You're gonna lose those benefits, and you may be worse off. So those are things that have got to be taken into consideration.
Seniors that are retired, the benefits them. I know it's everybody. These people work for all their lives.
I know.
The problem with the equation, also your senior centers, your healthcare centers here in Vermont, they have a sliding scale. The majority of people that got the increase, now they pay more of the
I got it.
So that's what I'm trying to tell you, the math is wrong.
Okay.
The seniors are
Okay, other questions? Woman right here.
Hi, my name is Pam Lads. I'm a citizen of Newport. We have a monopoly in this state. The monopoly controls the one landfill in this state. That landfill you can see on your way in here, that's Mount trash mall, as I call it. It's enormous, it's growing bigger.
That's the Casella land for one.
Correct. And as you know, Casella has a monopoly. He has favorite status with the state for whatever reason. I'm not saying racing cars have anything to do with it, but what can we do about that? It's this lake, this gorgeous lake that you see, just the jewel of this area. If this lake goes, we're done.
Yes.
That landfill is at risk of sliding into the lake. The next big storm, we can be totally screwed, and that's forever, because it's forever chemicals that are going in. What can you and the feds do to help us? Because the state's doing nothing.
Okay, is that a general concern? Okay, to be honest with you, it's not an issue that we have been involved in up to this point, but I'm hearing it from several different sources.
We'd love you to be involved.
Okay, let us, we have some good people, we'll take a look at it, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, gentleman over there.
I don't need it, Mike. Hi, Jonathan Lee, I'm on Newport. I drive a school bus for the high school. It's my retirement job. I keep trying to retire and I keep seeing a need. I'm also on the volunteer fire department. You almost touched on it, but the school bus driver crisis in New York City, Vermont, is across the nation. We have a school bus driver. We're down to 4 full-time drivers from 18. So we have 4, 2 more had to retire, because when you reach 80, you really don't want to drive a school bus.
That's a good regulation, I think.
50 or 60 kids behind me. But our proposal, and I was going to send it in, we've been talking about it this year, is my friend Donna's a school bus driver, and when her husband passed, she's collecting Social Security. But she pays all that money back to Social Security. So this year, I just got off the phone with her today, she can't drive the extra hours, even though she's a full-time school bus driver, because she ends up paying half the money
Good point.
back.
Yep.
So if you could get a bill out there for the nation,
I think that's a very good point. Yes.
even temporary waiver, that the bus drivers don't
It's
have
more than just bus drivers, believe me, but
There
that's
you
a
go.
very good point, yeah. Thank you.
Just to add to this lady's comment, when we drive every morning on 5 and 105, it's not only the pollution into the lake, Senator Sanders, it's also all the truck traffic.
Right.
If you come with me in the morning at 7 a.m., I almost got hit by one of them. Because those MBI tractor trailers are flying down the Columbia, and then they're flying back, and they're going 80 miles an hour on that highway. Pollution and dangerous, so.
And air pollution too.
That's right.
I think you touched a nerve here. Okay, other questions? Let's go to the back there and see what we got. Can you get back there, Beth?
If you can walk up, that would be great.
Thank you, Senator. I wonder if you could address an issue that affects all generations, and the youngest in particular, and that's the student debt crisis.
Oh, yeah.
It has been my view for a number of years that we should eliminate all student debt in this country, period. What is not perceived is you got a younger generation out there, our kids and grandchildren, who are really struggling. In many respects, our grandchildren, if we do not do the things we have to do, will have a lower standard of living than their parents. In other words, the American dream, including my parents, my father came to this country with nothing, he worked hard, wanted his kids to do better. That's all of our stories. But unfortunately, right now, you got a lot of kids out there who are not doing as well as their parents. They're not able to buy their own homes. In some cases, they're living, in their parents' home. And student debt is one of the major obstacles. We've got 45 million people in this country dealing with student debt. And if you stop and you think about it, what is the crime? How did they accumulate the debt? They wanted an education. Last I heard, trying to get an education should not be something that causes you financial distress for your entire life. And let me tell you something, I have met people your age, my age, who are still paying off their student debt. People whose Social Security is now being attached because they haven't paid off their student debt. Now some of the people, the opposition to this says, well, I was young, I worked hard, nobody forgave my debt. What they're forgetting about, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, 50 years ago, some of the major colleges and universities, you know what tuition was those days? Zero. Zero. My brother went to Brooklyn College, which is a very fine college. Zero tuition. University of California, one of the great universities in America, zero 50 years ago. And that changed in the world of Reagan, you know, something they started, states started withdrawing money and tuition went up, and we are where we are right now. So a lot of these guys who are moaning and groaning about, you know, opposition to forgiveness of debt, they got free college education. Where we are right now is Biden didn't do everything I wanted him to do. He went further than I thought. If we could pass what he proposed, it would be very, very significant to many millions of young people around this country. As you know, Supreme Court, with Republican support there, overturned that, and we're back on the drawing board trying to figure out where we go from here. But I strongly believe we've got to take that burden off of millions of young people. You know, and again, one of you, I want to touch on, you know, so I'm sure some of you may be thinking, well, it's all really well and good, Bernie wants to do this, Bernie wants to do that, how are you going to pay for all this stuff? Well, let's be clear. Among other things, you have a tax system which is grossly unfair. You have billionaires, in some cases, who pay virtually nothing in taxes. You have these large corporations that are able to maneuver their money and launder their money all over the world so they can avoid paying their fair share of taxes. If you had a fair tax system in America, demanding that the wealthy and large corporations, profitable companies, stop paying their fair share, would go a very long way to address that. And the other area, which not a lot of people talk about, I do, is we are now spending, I don't know how many of you know this, $900 billion a year on the military. We're spending more on the military than all of the other, what we call discretionary programs. That's healthcare and education, environment, all that stuff. More money just in the military. And the Pentagon has not been audited. It's the only agency of federal government, there's a law, but agencies of federal government have to undergo an independent audit. All right? Pentagon has been unable to do that. And there is reason to believe that there are tens and tens of billions of dollars in waste. They don't even know what they own. Military, major landowners in America, etc. So I think if we had a fair tax system, if we controlled military spending, we can go a long way to start addressing some of the real pressing issues that working families in this country face. Okay. I see a hand back there. Go back if you could. Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate all the work you're doing in the domestic area, and you've just touched a chord, and that is the out-of-control military spending. And I'm thinking of one example that's close to my heart. I'm a retired high school history teacher, often in Quaker schools, and there's a school in the West Bank, Ramallah Friends School, where a 16-year-old student was ripped out of his home, blood left on the floor, by 7 IDF soldiers and 5 security agents last October. He's the captain of his soccer team. What I'm asking is, the fact that we spend nearly $4 billion a year that this country gives to Israel for its military spending, 20% of its military budget each year. And that since World War II, this country has given $260 billion to Israel. I'm asking Bernie, can you be bold? Can you go and sit down with Shadi Khoury in his East Jerusalem home? Visit him. Can you be bold and go to Gaza and go to that family that set up that resort right there along the shore? And they can't run it now because of the bombs that are left over back from the 2014 war. I just ask you to be bold and go and visit.
Let me just say a word on that. We just passed a few months ago the military budget, and I voted against it. And in fact, I brought forth an amendment that would have cut military spending by 10%. Not a lot, but it would have been something. And I got all of 10 votes, so I got 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans. In terms of the Middle East, I agree with you absolutely. And in fact, believe it or not, as we speak, there are some out there who want to even cut the limited amounts of money that we give to Gaza. So my view is, and I've been public about this, you're quite right. We are spending a lot of money on military aid to Israel. Israel is violent. And I think if we're going to give them that much money, there should be a guarantee that they're going to respect human rights. And Gaza is a disaster right now, we know that. And if I had my druthers, we would put money into rebuilding Gaza, which is, I think the unemployment rate for kids there is what, 70% or something? Higher. Higher. Okay, thank you for you've touched on an important point. We got a question right here. We got young man.
My name is Diane Peel. I'm with Newport Wireless Mesh, which is a nonprofit providing low-cost internet service to our low-income neighborhood right over there in Newport. We have the wonderful NEK broadband initiative, which is a lot of millions of dollars of federal monies being poured into that to provide internet access to underserved areas. Unfortunately, a lot of that money will, by various means, find its way back to the big corporations that you were talking about a little while ago. However, that's another story. Unfortunately, that's not going to help my neighbors here in Newport, because we are not underserved, technically speaking. There's tons of internet if you want to pay a lot for it.
Who major providers? Comcast?
Comcast Consolidated, and I think that's about it. I could tell you a lot of stories about how people fall through the cracks on programs that are meant to help low-income people afford internet. I guess my question is, given that that whole initiative is not going to be helping us at all, what can be done about providing affordable internet, not just internet.
I know, believe me, I know.
And I do want to also make a plug for community wireless, which can be a great adjunct to fiber optics to bring the cost down, because it's very low cost.
First of all, thank you very much for what you're doing. What we have done in Washington is put many, many billions of dollars into trying at least to make sure that internet service becomes national and gets to areas where it does not exist right now. Your point is well taken, in the sense you could have internet, but you can't afford it. Right? What is internet? If you have Comcast here, what are you paying now? Who wants it? $80 a month, not just for internet, or is that for TV as well, or what? Just internet. Okay, that's a lot of money. All right.
And I have HughesNet. I can't even get the wireless. I have to have a satellite. I have satellite internet, and that's $80.
All right. All right, let me see what we can do, but I think we have brought in a lot of money, and now it's kind of in the state's hands to figure out the most effective way to get that money around the state. What I'm hearing from you is it's not necessarily addressing the needs that you perceive, right?
It's not happening.
Okay. Okay, gentlemen, right there.
Senator, this is an unrelated thing. I just hope you're getting enough rest, that Jane is seeing that you sleep and eat, and you seem to be a little spot of blood there, so you might want to do something about that. That looks serious.
No, it's not serious. I was at the dermatologist yesterday.
Okay, well, take care of yourself.
Okay.
Thank you.
Me as a vendor, I got one in the call. Okay, yes.
Senator, this is not a question, it's an acknowledgement. I'm Douglas Coots with the Memphremagog Community Maritime, and we just want to point out to all of us here today, the Senator has been very helpful with allocating some of the federal grants, a congressional earmark, here to the Gateway for us to set up our version here in Newport of the Echo Center in Burlington. Many of you have seen the banners upstairs around, so the education center will be based here, and it's always hard to actually land the first grant, and we were able to. We have $150,000 that has been organized through the senator and his staff coming here to Newport to set this up, and we will have a soft launch in the fall here. And it'll be a continuation of what we do with the Northern Star floating classroom. We'll have our education programs here inside during the winter months.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I was just walking along your boardwalk here. It is really beautiful. You should be very proud of it. Okay, people haven't asked the first question yet. Beth, I think we got some hands over there.
I'm sorry, where?
Hi, Bernie.
Hi.
It's been a while. But I did talk to you on the phone or online last winter while I was in California. And I said something about the post office. Let me follow up on that. Just a quick point. You know, the post office is trying to drive itself out of business. And one way is by their policy with regard to packages and insurance. If you send an insured package and it isn't received, you can't collect on the insurance unless you can prove to the post office that it was not received. Now, how do you do that? What you do is you go to Amazon because they'll give you your money back just for the saying so.
Dealing with the Postal Service is never easy. Is there any improvement in service here in general?
No.
Are people getting mail every day?
Yes.
All right, that's an improvement. Burlington, we were down to like 3 days a week. What we have done, as you know, there was some reasonably big reform a couple of years ago. The Postal Service was spending zillions of dollars every year on health insurance for people, you know, for years to come. And we dealt with that, and presumably that means more money is going into services today. We got problems with the leadership, but I am more than aware of the problems of the Postal Service, and it's something we're trying to address. You gentleman over there in the red t-shirt.
Eric's got some gauze for you.
That's all right. We'll live.
Let him do it, Bernie.
No, it's all right.
So we hear a lot about the fossil fuel side of the global warming.
Yeah.
But it seems like there's an awful lot of deforestation going
Yep.
around. The U.S. Forest Service seems to be having a great deal of initiatives. In fact, one down in the White Mountain National Forest to clear cut huge areas. So I think it makes sense to think that preserving our forests would go a long way to keep the environment cooler and to eat up carbon. Maybe we don't have to wipe our butts with Maine forest trees. We can grow fiber crops on already plowed ground in the Middle West and have maybe more synthetic materials so that every porch that we build doesn't cut a few acres of Maine forest. I was wondering what's going on with some of that. Just as one more comment that might be a little controversial, I'm sorry after what that guy said, but in 1938, the chairman of the Palestinian Arabs, the Mufti of Jerusalem, met personally with Adolf Hitler to discuss the final solution of the Jews in Palestine.
I know, but to be fair, that was 1938. The world has changed.
Well, let's
no
hope
one,
it has.
nobody thinks that everybody in the Arab world is wonderful. I surely don't. But Israel's relationship to Gaza is really quite unacceptable. We can do a lot better than that.
Yep.
Okay, let's get, right here, ma'am.
I'm concerned that since 2016, some of us have had a much harder time talking to our neighbors. And we know about the bitterness of political division in our country now. It's hard to believe. And I wonder, laying some of the blame on what has happened with television and other communication regulation, whether or not there's any appetite for returning to an equal time requirement for federal regulation.
I don't know that there is, but I share your concern. I mean, if you watch Fox TV, you get a certain worldview. You watch MSNBC, you get a different point of view. Actually, I'm going to give a speech in New Hampshire on Saturday on kind of just this issue. And I think the good news is, if we're smart, we can have some impact on that division in the sense that there are many, many issues in which, whether you're a right-wing conservative or a progressive, there is common ground. Some there are not. I mean, the abortion issue is one where there's a division. I don't know how you address that. But I'll tell you what, I've seen polling that was just to Republicans. You know what their major domestic concern was? Wasn't overthrowing the government. It was the high cost of prescription drugs. It's true. And you have many Republicans living in rural communities, which, like the Northeast Kingdom, are struggling, need some help. So I think if we can create the energy to say, you know what, we're going to lower the costs of prescription drugs. We're going to provide health care to all people, including in rural areas and in urban areas. We're going to make sure that every kid in this country, I don't care where you live, is able to get a good education. And if you don't want to go to college, I was this morning, I was at Cabot Creamery. You all know Cabot cheese, right?
Oh, yes.
And what they say is they're making money, they're doing okay, but if they had the workforce, they could significantly increase production. They don't have the workforce. So you got kids sitting in school who would like to get their hands dirty and make some money. So we've got to get them the kind of apprenticeship programs to give them the training to go out, because many employers throughout this state and country desperately need those kids. Right?
We've got a little goat farm in Enosburg that has the same problem.
All right. So, there are things that we can do that I think can break through. If you ask conservative Republicans whether they think we should give tax breaks to billionaires, they don't think so. So what we have to do is focus on issues that bring us together, and a lot of that has to do with demanding that we end the kind of corporate greed that exists in America today. I think there's widespread support for that. Okay, maybe a couple of more questions. No, the Robin asked the first question, yeah. Ma'am, right here, yeah.
Thank you for all that you've done and keep doing for all of us. My question is, are you considering or do you support to have peace talks in Ukraine?
Well, everybody wants that terrible war to end. Anything that we could do, I would like to see it end. It's a very, very painful and difficult situation. What I can tell you, absolutely, is that this war did not have to take place. Putin made the claim that he was being threatened by NATO and his territorial surroundings were being encroached upon. What I can tell you is that the Biden administration could have and would have come to any reasonable solution. They didn't want it. He wanted that war. And the dilemma that you face right now, and it's terrible. I mean, the destruction that's going on is unspeakable. In fact, we never thought, I never did, that after World War II we would be seeing what we're seeing right now. We thought it was finished in World War II. So it's awful. So do I want to see an end to that war as quickly as possible? Absolutely. But on the other hand, you cannot, I think, give Putin just the green light to think that he can continue to expand. I think in the long run, that will be even worse. So it's a tough one. We want to end this war. We want to end the terrible suffering that's going on, the amount of money that we and other countries are spending. But I think this guy, Putin, is not a good guy. All right, maybe one or two more questions. I see a question in the back there. Yeah, the one.
My name is Elaine Locke. I'm president of Northeast Kingdom
Kingdom home care. I think everybody heard that. As you know from many people, including myself, the workforce for elder care is really in trouble.
I know.
And I've made and written all sorts of crazy suggestions like targeted immigration, the idea of some kind of benefits for people who work in elder care, to, maybe tax benefits or whatever. I don't know if anything like that can be done, but I'm wondering what people in the Senate and other people in politics, are they aware of what a massive problem we have, not just in Vermont, but nationwide, in terms of workforce to care for all of us, this increasingly large cohort of people. And then,
and it's only going to get worse as we become older.
That's right.
Look, again, going back, and this is very political. It is, and I work in the Senate, and it is hard for me to understand how there are people who choose, who know, not being stupid, who denies. Do you think there's anybody in the world who knows that we don't have enough doctors, we don't have enough nurses, we don't have enough dentists, we don't have enough mental health counselors, we do not have enough home health care workers. I held a rally in Washington with hundreds of home health care workers who, by the way, went through the COVID. They went to people's homes during COVID. Some of them died, some of them got sick. Real heroines and heroes, okay? And right now, this is the irrationality of our current healthcare system. We force people to go to a nursing home who would rather stay home if they can get the assistance in their home, right? They would prefer that. It would save the system substantial sums of money, but we don't have the workers to come into their homes. The workers there are being underpaid. We don't have enough of them. So what I would say to you, yes, some of us are more than aware of that. During Build Back Better, we proposed hundreds of billions of dollars to raise salaries to attract people into home health care. All right, it is a crisis here, absolutely. Integral part of the whole broken healthcare system that has to be addressed. All right, maybe last question. We got one right here.
I remember many years ago, you telling people that there was a problem with climate change. And there were a lot of people that said, no.
That's right.
And look at the mess we're in now. Is there any hope somebody will wake up and do something?
The answer is yes, and I think this summer, still summer, right? I woke up yesterday, I don't know how it was here in Burlington, it was unbelievable. It was like, looked like it was 8 o'clock in the evening. It was really really dark, kind of scary. All right, here's, in this Inflation Reduction Act, we put something like $300 billion into energy efficiency and renewable energies. And one of the provisions in there was something that I wrote. Does anybody here have solar on their rooftop? How's it working for you? What kind of reduction have you seen in your electric bill?
You just pay basic coverage.
Other than that, you don't pay an electric bill?
No, we have net zero house.
Okay. Other people have solar. What do you pay? Yeah, man. All right. In my case, our electric bill went down in Burlington by 80%. So the problem is, you can save money if you have solar rooftops, if you have decent solar exposure. Many people don't have the upfront money to buy the solar. It could cost you $15,000, $18,000, I don't know what it cost you, but it costs somewhere around there. So the legislation that we got passed, which will be implemented hopefully within the next few months, will get you that upfront money, depending on your income. If you're lower income, it'll be a grant for you to put up solar. If you're middle income, you will get the upfront money. You will pay it back by not paying any more than you're currently paying on your electric bill, and at the end of 7-8 years, you'll then own the panels and see a 80% reduction in your electric bill. So to answer your question, there is a lot that is being done. Here is the very bad news, and it is, I just wrote an article yesterday, actually, on this. Unlike other things, if America tomorrow did all of the right things, all all right? You know, we really moved away from fossil fuel, with energy efficiency, went to sustainable energy, all did that tomorrow. It still would not solve the problem. Because you've got countries all over the world who are putting a huge amount of carbon into the atmosphere. It used to be that we were the #1 carbon emitters. We're not, we're #2. China is now the major carbon emitter. Now China, in fairness, is spending zillions of dollars on sustainable energy. They are the major producers in the world. Many of the solar panels that we have come from China. So far and away, they are producing more sustainable energy products than anybody else. On the other hand, at the same time, they're building new coal-burning plants every bloody day. So what has got to happen, in my view, is what I wrote in an article yesterday, is the United States and China, what I worry about very much, is we are heading to a Cold War with China. There are people in this country, people in China, who like the idea of a growing division between the United States and China. I personally think that's a disaster. And if that takes place, we're never going to have the international cooperation that we need to solve the climate crisis. You cannot do it without China. You want to push China away, you want to go to a Cold War with China, that's fine. Then the planet is probably doomed. So we're going to have to bring people together. And the insanity of this, we are rapidly increasing military spending. China is rapidly increasing military spending, right? Everyone's planning for a war. Seems to me that if both countries could cut their military spending and use that to battle climate change, it would make a lot more sense than building up their armies. All right. Listen, thank you all. Thanks very much for coming out. I hope I didn't get everybody altogether depressed. Because I don't want to. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the problems we face are serious. They are solvable. I don't want you to think that they're not. We can solve them. It's going to take a lot of work on the part of all of us. So thank you all very much for being here. I look forward to coming back in the not too distant future.